Languages often spread through diffusion, the spread of culture over wide areas through migration as well as by more indirect means. The major globalized languages of the world, English, French, Spanish, and Arabic, spread from their hearths largely because of conquest and colonialism. In the case of Arabic, its use as a standard religious language in Islam contributed to its success. Some languages never diffuse widely. Mandarin Chinese, though the second most commonly spoken language in the world, did not. Though China was the most powerful and innovative country in the world for much of the past 2,000 years, and its merchants settled in various parts of Asia and Oceania, China never established colonies outside of Asia, and as a result, Chinese speakers have always been concentrated in China. Unlike Chinese, English has a wide spatial distribution. English is the most widely used language in the world, with nearly 1.5 billion speakers. Native speakers are concentrated in lands colonized by Great Britain, such as the United States, Canada, South Africa, India, and Australia. However, most speakers of English do not use it as their primary language. Rather, they use it as a lingua franca, a common language used by people who do not share the same native language. For example, Nigerians commonly speak one of 500 indigenous languages at home, but they learn English to communicate with everyone who does not speak their language. Globalization and new technology explain why English is a common lingua franca. First, multinational corporations based in the United States and Great Britain made English the common language for international business. 2. Scientists and other scholars, airline pilots throughout the world, and many journalists began to use English to communicate across the globe. 3. English evolved as the lingua franca of the internet and is widely used in social media. And 4. Television shows and movies are often in English and they are shown around the world. The wide use of English has made communication among people around the world easier. However, it's also sparked some resentment in some who feel that the intrusion of American language and culture dilutes their own unique linguistic and cultural practices. Other major lingua francas are Arabic, Spanish, French, Swahili, and Russian, and each of these has a wide distribution and is often learned as a second language. Many new words begin as slang, an informal usage by a segment of the population. For example, the word brunch was slang before it became standard. When speakers of two different languages have extensive contact with each other, often because of trade, they sometimes develop a pidgin language, a simplified mixture of two languages that has fewer grammar rules and a smaller vocabulary. But it's not the native language of either group. In Papua New Guinea, for example, the pidgin combines English and Papuan languages. Over time, two or more separate languages can mix and develop a more formal structure and vocabulary so that they are no longer a pidgin language. They create a new combined language known as a Creole language. Afrikaans is a Creole language that's spoken in South Africa that combines Dutch with several European and African languages. On the islands of the Caribbean, Creole languages are pretty common. Africans captured and brought to enslavement in the Americas between the 1500s and the 1800s were unable to transplant their languages. Stolen from their communities, they were forced onto ships with captives from various regions in Africa. With no common language among the groups of captives, communication was difficult. Because of this linguistic isolation, most lost their languages after a generation in the Americas. Yet they were able to create Creole languages by combining parts of their African languages with the European colonizers' languages of English, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. The most widely used Creole language in the Americas is found in Haiti. Haitian Creole is derived mostly from French, with influences from numerous languages of West Africa. It has become the official language of Haiti and a source of national pride and cultural identity. The United States included a smaller percentage of enslaved Africans than did many Caribbean islands, so it had fewer Creole languages. One exception is the Gullah or Geechee language of South Carolina and Georgia, in places where enslaved Africans once made up about 3/4 of the population. Another example of language mixing occurred in East Africa. As early as the 8th century, trade between Arab-speaking merchants and Bantu-speaking residents resulted in the development of Swahili. Swahili is still spoken by some groups in Africa and is an official language of 4 African nations: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Language is important to a group's cultural identity. Because a culture occupies a certain spatial area, its language becomes intertwined with that place and its landscape. For example, native Hawaiians, whose economy relies on fishing, have 5 dozen words for fishing nets. In addition, signs in some places create a cultural landscape as they reflect the people's linguistic heritage and tie them to that place, from the single language signs in France to bilingual signs in places such as Belgium or Quebec. Toponyms, the names of places, also reflect culture. For example, in 657 BC, the Greeks founded a colony that they named Byzantium, probably after a leader named Byzas. After the city fell under Roman control, the Romans renamed it Constantinople, after one of their emperors. When the Turks seized the city in 1453, they started to call it Istanbul, which means to the city. While the United States does not have an official language, one designated by law to be the language of the government, some countries do, and these countries can be grouped into 3 categories. Some countries are homogeneous, or made up largely of ethnically similar people, like Iceland, Japan, or Slovenia. Some countries use language to discourage people from maintaining a traditional culture. English colonizers did this in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales to promote quick assimilation. Some countries include several large ethnic groups. These countries want to honor all groups equally. So, for example, Zimbabwe is home to several large ethnic groups, so it has 16 official languages. People use English as a lingua franca to make communication easier.